Hello, welcome to Reframing Mindset Podcast. We are clear my head of the thoughts that are preventing clarity, practice my speech, among other things. Episodes range from informative knowledge to funny stories about my experiences, and in the future, maybe include interviews. So subscribe and enjoy. Episodes drop every other day. Okay, now so welcome back to Reframe Mindset Podcast. My name is Colin Smith Brooks, and this episode is going to talk about the world is opening up, and this is basically this topic came to me because now before this podcast and such like that, one of the reasons that kind of prompted me to start the podcast was this goal that me and some of my friends had back way before this podcast. Just when I left university, I said I want to went to go to Japan, I wanted to go to Japan. But for them, due to where they were, it was more kind of realistic for them. But for me, it wasn't really. It would be, it was like hard, due to my circumstances and such like that. So while I like the idea, I was kind of realistic to the fact that, okay, yeah, I might not, I might not get to do it. And such like just like everything. As I said, I started out really poor. So majority of the stuff that I'm experiencing now is like I'm catching up. If you may really think about it, I'm catching up. Cause like the game, if you watch my gaming journey, and I started from way back. I never got the PS4 until way my second year in university at around, and the PS4 came out like when I was in grade 10 or such like that. So you see, yeah, it takes some time for me to catch up. I know I don't have my PS4, and then I'm working now to get a new console and get my PC fixed again. So I said, it's if you're a person starting out with nothing, starting out from nothing, this podcast is really a good podcast for you because I was legit starting. I was legit starting from nothing. I yeah, I was legit starting from nothing. So the stories from how I got from nothing to where I'm at. But as I said, with the world is open up. And as the reason why I say that is that we're getting into 2023, and if you're listening to this, hopefully you're healthy and such healthy, and not only healthy, hopefully you're doing things. Maybe you're in school still, so you're working to get into a next grade or such like that. Or you're starting your business. Hopefully I've been doing something to actually help you progress. Because if you basically been listening to me this whole year, and then if you listen to this episode and you're basically at the same place you were at the start of 2000 and when 2022 started, I guess I can't say that's a sad thing for you, but you should be kind of say okay. Well, you should really say that because now, back when I just before I when I just left the university, I was a slow starter because as I said, I never really had any formula on how I need to progress. So maybe you listen to the podcast and maybe you see me progressing, but you don't know how I are afraid to take the risk because that was me in the initial stage. I was afraid to take the risk and such like that. But what I did to start was I took a risk that was what was easy. So when I left university, so going to school, you're doing exam and such like that. The risk was me failing that exam and then have to pay to do it over. The highest risk when I was in school was so like when I was doing lab, we usually work with acids. So if that acid drop on you, you burn up. So that was one kind of risk doing the science course. Exams, in high school, the greatest thing was to fail an exam. And but then if you wasn't when it not if you're not doing the national exam that you which you had to pay for, if it was normal exam, you could fail some and pass. And as long as you did well overall, you got to where you wanted to be. But I always did really well to get where I needed to be. But like in the things like the CXC and such like that, the Caribbean exams, if you have to pay to do those, and if you fail that, you have to pay to do it again. So the risk then was money on the line. But in university now, it's a lot more money on the line, a lot more. So that's basically it. But in the real world now, it's your life on the line. That's basically it. Because once you left to leave the school, basically it's just death. It's just death. Basically, the next thing. So what you're doing between now and between death is trying to live a fulfilled life. Yeah. So what? So as I said, when I left university, I had no formula as to how I was going to progress. So I had to try to find a way to start somewhere, and I never know what risk to take because I said every step that starting a YouTube channel was hard. It took money and such like that. So and it was risky. Well, it wasn't risky, but it took money, which I didn't have, and I couldn't get any job. Couldn't get any job. So as I said, a podcast was me taking a risk. And when I started taking the risk, actually, it's due to how I became paranoid, I kind of stopped then. And I stopped then. But what was the first risk that I took, what was kind of comfortable, but it was really risky, was getting my driver's license. Because what that allowed me to do was it gave me it, the goal was basically if I got the driver's license, I would be more marketable in the market in the working world because majority of these jobs they listed having a driver's license would be a valid option, would be a plus, would be a plus. So getting my driver's license was one of the first thing that kind of first real life risk that I took because a lot of people die from car crash and such like that. So that was one of the first real life risk that I took. That I said, okay, this is my first step into progressing in life, and I did that, and I got the license. And after I got the license, now I was basically stuck where I was at, and that prompted me to actually start by the podcast because after I got the license, it it was during the pandemic that I actually did the do the driving classes and such like that. So I had to protect myself and such and stuff. And when I got the license, we were still kind of in the pandemic as well. They were doing the lockdown still. So the the thing came that okay, I'm just going to do the podcast because why not? Why not do it? I'm basically being locked down. I have nothing to do some days. So I just said, okay, I'm gonna start recording a lot of episodes. And that was the second risk that I took. And as I to start recording the podcast and such like that, I started how to find out how to find out how I'm going to progress myself from where I was at because I said I was at my uncle's place when I got the license, and, and somehow somewhere I had to progress. I had to find some way. I was trying to find out how to get a car or something like that. So after then I started to take more and more risk, and eventually I'm where I'm at now. But the reason why I'm saying this is because back when I had the back when I was doing the back when I was doing yeah. So the reason why I was saying this is because now back before the podcast and such like that, when the idea came to travel to that country and such. Prior to then, I barely knew my country, and I barely had money, and I barely left the house because the house was where I had internet. So I barely left the house, and when I left house to go certain places to buy certain things, and I just came home. But as I said, the pandemic and getting the driver's license forced me to travel, explore, take risk, and I end up learning a lot about my country and learn about all the untapped potential that it had and how I could carve my own lane while also take my time to kind of integrate myself into the country and such like that in the right way because there's a lot of wrong way to do to integrate yourself in the country. Ideally, I want to do the right way. I did reach this far doing the right way. I just wanted to continue that streak, and you understand why later. So so yeah, so that's it. So what the title is, the world is opening up. 2018 to 2019, I barely left the house, and 2021 and 2022, I basically traveled so much around the country. you know, so that's to show you how you can start out slow, but over time things will open up. And overall, I've traveled to one other country outside of my country so far in my lifetime, and I almost got to travel to the other country as I was trying to do my masters in another country, but due to the corona, that kind of threw off the plans and whatnot. But now we're here, now we're here, and I progressed and reached so far, and I had a lot of network. But what also happened was all this time was I kept my record clean. So as I said, do things the right way, and I kept my I don't do any wrongdoings. I try my best to stay out of trouble, and such as I make good company. You know, ideally, because as I said, the wrong person can really turn your life around in the negative way. And ideally, what I want to do is travel eventually. I want to travel. And if I'm basically hanging around negative people, not only you prevent yourself from progressing, you end up regressing into a negative lifestyle, and then you end up reaching a bad state of mind because this pandemic, lot of the deaths were due to bad choices. Like majority of the cases came from crowd going to a places that they said ideally you shouldn't have went. Lot of the bad choices they have made their life is due to you going somewhere that you shouldn't have gone or went with people you shouldn't have been with. You did have good influence. Lot of you will never reach progress so far in life because due to bad influence. Like most of you left high school and never had the chance to go to university due to bad influence. You know, bad influence forced you to get bad grades and such like that. And so like I said that statement we all can relate. And the thing is that the world is open. There's so billion of us in the world. Corona took a lot of us out. But the world is open up. But what happened is the thing that kind of prevents us is the money, there's transportation and what. So there are various ways to really, and they're gatekeepers. Gatekeepers. Because as I said, there are different classes. There are different classes, and you can't really just hop into another class just like that. You have to really work your way up to that thing. So that's what I've been doing. I've been basically working my way up into this tax bracket, the different areas. And what happened is every time I reach a certain place, you have to change how you approach things. You can't approach things the way how you do it. For example, this podcast, I try to speak more English as majority of the world is English. So I try to my best to speak as fluent as possible so that it can be understood as much as possible by the people listening because I have lot more I don't have audience only in my country. It's other countries as well. So that's the first thing I had to do Next thing I had to do was become more professional the way I do things. And I was more lackadaisical and so, but I had to be more professional. I have to become more competent. I'm a biochemist now. I and I graduated from a university with a degree in biochemistry. I'm a biochemist. I'm a scientist now. I have to really approach that myself now as a scientist so that those opportunities, those science opportunities, if they are available, I can get it. And if I get it, I can maybe travel and do and experience stuff as a scientist. So that's the next thing where I said the world is opening up. If you start to act your profession, become more professional, professional opportunities will come to you, and then you can grab it and then use that to travel. So that's the next thing how to do it. Next thing my family always say, manners carry through the world is a saying, which is a have good manners, have good relationship with people. Don't try your best to leave a good impression on people because those people can really get you to places that you never thought you would be. And those you acting, leaving a good impression on the first time you deal with them can really help you. So if they reach somewhere, they can bring you and say, okay, yeah, this person I had good relation with them, so I can, So that's the next thing. Have good relationship with people. Have good manners, good etiquette. Just say good morning to people. All those stuff. All those stuff related. Start doing those stuff, and it can get you places because what happen is you leave a good impression on person, and you don't know who that person is. You never know who that person will become. So doing that is like, for example, people are doing you wrong, and then after you're in a position of power, and that person that usually that do wrong now needs your help. You take the L back then, but no, you're in the power position now. So that's how where life can turn. That's how where life can turn. And that's how the world is. So, as I said, we're going into 2023 now, and opportunities can come. What also can happen is that I may not make it to 2023. That's the pandemic taught me that. So I have to really say, okay, that's a reality as well. While while I have that nihilistic view, if I reach to 2023, I want to put myself in a position where I'm able to take all those travel opportunities if that is possible. So right now, what's preventing me is the money, and then they have to find out how to the process because to travel some places you need a visa and some places don't. But as I said, it I want it to go as smooth as possible. That's one of the reasons why I've been setting myself up so long was to build up my reputation to be a very reliable person and get myself so that when I'm getting to these places, I know how to carry myself. I want to build most of this podcasting was developing my individual reputation so that when I'm traveling to these places, I know how to keep. I know I hope can bring something to the table, so that yeah, I can get these opportunities because some of you listening may not have the chance, never had the chance to travel before. This 2023 is coming. This is your chance. And if you start to do things now to actually start prepare you for those opportunities, you never know what will happen. You never know what will happen. So, as I said, the world is opening up. And next thing I want to talk about is to give you an example is my journey from primary school to university. So in primary school, what usually happened was when I just started, my aunt usually carried me to the primary school. So I usually went to the primary school. My worldview was that primary school playground and the school itself, school compound. And then when I went home, my home was my world. And then wherever my auntie would take me. So that was my world. when I was younger. Then after a while, my auntie left, and then I had to start taking taxi by myself. When I started taking taxi by myself, I just took the taxi and went home, and I rarely went out anywhere. But as I said, the primary school, my world was the primary school and the and my home. When I reached the high school, my world was the area from my home to from past the primary school to the high school. So the high school was in a different parish. So my home was in a different parish. My primary school was in a parish adjacent to my home, and then my high school was in the parish adjacent to the parish of my primary school. So by me doing well in primary school and getting placed in the high school in the other parish, my world just opened up into another parish. My world just opened up into another parish. So that's three parish now I have access to and such like that. And experience new things. Then what happened was my high school friends, it allowed me to open up my worldview and various things. It's my high school friend that influenced me to get internet because they introduced me to Facebook and such like that. It was one of my it was due to my friend that I ended up playing basketball, so I tried to other schools, traveling to other schools and all kind of stuff. And over time doing well in school, I started to travel. Um to I traveled to my university before I went to my university because due to doing science and such like that. As I said, just by me doing well, staying out of trouble as much as I can, and the has good influences, being around good company. You work Some of them were kind of bad company, but me being a good company myself, being as good as I can myself, keeping myself out of trouble as much as I can myself, and taking the good out of the bad, I got to enlarge my worldview just by going through school. And when I reached university, leave high school now, I went to the university, which we was in a parish on the other side of the country. So my home was on the west side. My university is on the way on the east side. Different world, different world. So just through me pursuing my science dream, my world has opened up from a basic primary school to a big university where I meet people from different Caribbean islands, people from different school, learn different cultures. You know, back then, back in high school, I was a nerd and such like that. In the university, my reputation was pretty solid, where girls actually liked me. Based on my impression, no matter how weird I was, some girl just are just attracted to me. I'm like, that's what happened when you get your reputation solid and you progress with good company. Opportunities like that happen where a nerd getting all these girls, going to parties with girls, and girls, most girls don't dance with me, but other girls, due to how the hall I was, the girls on the hall, and how I carried myself on the hall, the girls there, when I went to parties and I see them, they're more likely to dance with me. So things like that open up your world. Things like that open up your world. So when I left university now, that's basically what the academics got me. That's what the academics got me. When I leave university now, I barely could get a job, so I barely could leave the house. So imagine you being introduced to that life, and then you leave university, and then boom, you don't have no longer no access to that life because you have no reason to go. You barely have a reason to go there. You have no job and such like that. So that was me. I was introduced to that life, and then boom, it was taken away all at once. Then now the friend came to the idea that okay, we can go to Java one day. I had no idea how I was going to get money to do that. And not only that, I never had any way to actually go to travel because you have to go to the embassy, and all those process takes a while. So I was pretty depressed. I was pretty depressed because I was introduced to this life. I built up my reputation so solid, and due to that one problem, my third year failure, I am basically have no access to that opportunity again because I'm basically could get a job. I was poor. I barely could leave the house. So all had was my PS4, the internet, and nothing. And I was pretty depressed. And all of a sudden, I am here. You know what happened to get here, to how I got here. The podcast can tell you, but who would have thought? I would never, in my wildest dream, thought I would reach here. But then, but then when I left university, I would never thought I would reach here. I think about it why I say that because I had only one official job that I have since then. And it was barely an official job because it was a startup company. So that look we have reached just by taking the opportunities that was given to me. And what happened now is I'm trying to keep myself safe and do what I need to do here. I can set up myself now to actually um travel to other countries because this podcast is basically like my resume, as such like that. And then I have my real resume, then I have my reputation. And then what happened now? I'm dealing with people. So people getting to know who I am, how I do stuff. And people building up my credibility through my action being loaded up my words, you know, will hopefully open up my opportunity to travel to other countries. And when that happen, is people will say it's luck, but no, it's due to me preparing myself for the opportunity to travel because I see the world opening up. I said, okay, let me set up myself to prepare myself for when the world open up, I can take full advantage of it. Because what I said, luck is preparation meeting opportunity. I think that's the thing. But if I prepare myself and then I see the opportunity, I can take it before a lot of people don't. And that's due to me preparing. So that's basically what I'm doing now. And that's basically what this episode is telling you now. That 2023 is coming. So if you start to just take your time to set up yourself, look for the opportunities around you, and prepare yourself, you can just take that opportunity. Like for example, all of a sudden recently, my the Caribbean has a basketball league, and my coach is now in that league and he's basically playing with pros and taking that opportunity to maybe travel to different countries to play basketball. His dream, that's what he usually love to do. That's what I grew up on and love to do, playing basketball. I know he's doing that as his dream, so that's basically due to him putting time to work on his craft, and his craft is taking him all around the world. If you listen to his episode, his name is Dave Black. If you listen to his episode, you'll learn where basketball has taken him. Next, for example, two of my instrumental guests, Shane Love and Oki McIntyre. Though them taking their time to practice their craft, brought them to Coachella. So that's what happened. That's the idea that I'm trying to give you guys. That take your time now to prepare yourself for when the opportunity comes, and it can take you somewhere you never thought you'd be in 2023. So just take your time and prepare for it now. So that. Thanks for listening to this episode. Um, um, look forward for the next episode. Mhm.
Well, this is the end of the episode. Thanks for watching and look forward for the next episode. To support this podcast, go to anchor.fm/cssb/support or become a sponsor for this episode. If you have a product that you want to have more exposure, DM me on the Instagram page, Reframing Mindset Podcast, or on Twitter at ReframingP. Either way would help. Thank you regardless for listening, and here's a preview for the next episode.
Taking the time to listen, because that's a flaw many of us have. I had it. I still kind of have it. But it's one of those things where, no matter how big or small, taking the time to listen is, I think, one of the key things in solving many problems, because sometimes we don't really take time to really listen to what the person are saying and then realize that, okay, this what, a lot of things, there, people communicate in a lot of different ways, but the way I communicate now was way different than I used to communicate back then. I think it's through practice. So, people have, I think, communicating, well, there's a communication degree. So there are levels of communication.